My neighbor knocked at 5 a.m. He had a gun. He said, "Your brother and parents planned a massacre to catch you." I didn't believe him. Until I saw the news. The pounding on my apartment door dragged me from sleep at exactly 5:07 a.m. My phone screen glowed in the darkness, showing missed calls from unknown numbers. 3 of them. The knocking grew more insistent. "Ms. Crawford. Open up." The voice belonged to Mr. Patterson from 4B, the retired veteran who'd lived across the hall for the past 6 years. We'd exchanged pleasantries maybe twice. I stumbled to the door, still in my pajamas, fumbling with the chain lock. Through the peephole, I could see him standing there in tactical gear, a handgun visible at his hip. My stomach dropped. "What's happening?" I called through the door. "You need to let me in right now. Your life is in danger." Something in his tone made me unlock the door. He pushed inside quickly, scanning the hallway before closing it behind him. His face was pale, drawn tight with urgency. "Your brother and parents planned a massacre to catch you," he said, still catching his breath. "They're coming here. We have maybe 15 minutes. The words didn't compute. My brother Travis was a financial analyst. My mother taught kindergarten. Dad owned a hardware store. The suggestion was absurd. "Mr. Patterson, I think you might be confused." "I'm not confused." He pulled out his phone, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. "I monitor police scanners. Always have. Old habits from the service. 20 minutes ago, there was a domestic disturbance call at 2847 Riverside Drive. That's your parents' address." My blood went cold. He was right about the address. When officers arrived, they found evidence of an active threat situation. Your father had materials for explosive devices in the garage. Your brother was there too. They had blueprints, photographs. Your apartment building was circled on a map. "This doesn't make sense." My voice came out hoarse. "Why would they? Does it matter right now?" He grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to focus. "Get dressed. Grab your wallet, keys, and phone. Nothing else. We're leaving through the fire exit." I stood frozen, trying to process what he was telling me. My family wanted to hurt me? To orchestrate something so horrific that he was using the word massacre? "Move." His command snapped me into action. I rushed to my bedroom, pulling on jeans and a sweatshirt. My hands shook as I shoved my feet into sneakers. Through my window, I could see the street below, still dark and quiet. Nothing seemed unusual. Mr. Patterson appeared in my doorway. "Leave your phone here. They can track it." "But, leave it." I set it on the dresser, feeling suddenly untethered from reality. Without my phone, without time to think, I was operating on pure instinct and the desperate hope that this man wasn't leading me into something worse. We moved quickly through the hallway to the fire exit. The metal door creaked as he pushed it open, and we descended the concrete stairs. Each footfall echoed in the stairwell. My mind raced through possibilities, searching for any explanation that made sense. 6 months ago, I'd inherited my grandmother's estate. The entire thing, because I'd been the only one caring for her during her final years. Travis had shown up once, stayed for an hour, then disappeared. Our parents had visited twice in 3 years. When she died, she left everything to me: the house, the investments, nearly $2 million total. The fury from my family had been immediate and vicious. Travis hired a lawyer to contest the will. Our parents stopped speaking to me entirely. Every family gathering became a battlefield until I stopped attending altogether. But this? Planning violence seemed like an impossible escalation. We reached the ground floor. Mr. Patterson checked through the door's small window before opening it. His truck sat parked in the alley, a beat-up Ford with rust spots on the sides. "Get in." I climbed into the passenger seat. The interior smelled like coffee and motor oil. He started the engine and pulled out of the alley without turning on the headlights. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe. Away from here." He finally flicked on the lights once we were 2 blocks away. "I called the police after I heard the scanner traffic. They're sending units to your building. Maybe we should go back then. If the police are there, your family knows you live alone. They know your routines. If this plan was coordinated enough to have explosives and blueprints, they've thought about contingencies." He drove toward the highway, keeping exactly at the speed limit. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. Everything about this felt surreal, like I'd wake up any moment and find it was just a nightmare. "Why did you help me?" The question came out small. "Because I've seen what family members are capable of when money's involved. My sister tried to kill me over an inheritance back in '98. I didn't see it coming either." We drove in silence for several minutes. The sky was beginning to lighten, painting everything in shades of gray. Mr. Patterson pulled into a 24-hour diner parking lot and finally turned off the engine. "We'll wait here. Once the sun's up and we know more, we can figure out next steps. Inside, the diner was nearly empty. A waitress with tired eyes brought us coffee without being asked. Mr. Patterson ordered eggs and toast. I couldn't imagine eating anything. "You don't believe it yet," he said, watching me over the rim of his cup. "That's normal. Your brain is trying to protect you from the truth. You're asking me to believe that my parents and brother wanted to kill me. Maybe other people too, based on your use of the word massacre. That's not something you just accept." "No, it's not." He pulled out a battered flip phone. "But you will. Because it's true." He made a call, speaking in low tones I couldn't quite hear. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "They arrested your father at the scene. Your brother fled. Your mother is in custody as an accessory." The diner spun around me. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to anchor myself to something solid. The explosives were real. So were the plans. They had your work schedule, knew when you'd be home. The police found evidence they'd been planning this for weeks. "But why?" My voice cracked. "Even with the inheritance, why would they? Because people don't think rationally when they believe they've been cheated. They fixate. They convince themselves that violence is justified, that they're the victims." The waitress brought his food. The smell of eggs made my stomach turn. "Travis lost his job 3 months ago," I said slowly, pieces clicking together. "He called me once, asking for a loan. I said no because he'd never paid me back before. He screamed at me for 20 minutes about how I'd stolen his birthright." There it is. Mr. Patterson cut into his eggs. "That's where this started. My mother called last week. She wanted me to do the right thing and split the inheritance evenly. Said Grandma wasn't in her right mind when she made the will. They'd convinced themselves you were the villain. Made it easier to justify what they were planning." I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, needing the warmth. Nothing about this morning felt real. Hours ago, I'd been sleeping peacefully. Now I was in a diner, learning that my family had plotted to murder me. "You should eat something," Mr. Patterson said. "I can't. You need to keep your strength up. Long day ahead." He was right, though I hated it. I ordered oatmeal when the waitress came back, forcing down small spoonfuls while my mind continued racing. Around 6:30, Mr. Patterson's phone rang. He answered, listening intently. His jaw tightened as whoever was on the other end spoke. "Understood. Yes, she's safe. I'll bring her in." He ended the call and looked at me with something like pity. "They found additional evidence. Your family was planning to target your workplace too. They wanted to ensure you couldn't escape, so they were going to create chaos in multiple locations simultaneously." The oatmeal threatened to come back up. "My coworkers? They were going to hurt innocent people?" "That appears to have been the plan. The police want you to come in for a statement. They have questions about your family dynamics, about the inheritance dispute." I nodded numbly. What else could I do? The police station was a blur of fluorescent lights and generic office furniture. A detective named Morrison took my statement, asking questions about the timeline of events, about my relationship with my family, about any threats they'd made. "Did your brother ever express violent ideation?" she asked, pen poised over her notepad. "He was angry. Bitter. But I never thought." I trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. People are good at hiding their intentions when it serves them. The evidence we recovered suggests this had been in planning stages for approximately 6 weeks. 6 weeks. While I'd been going about my normal life, working and sleeping and grabbing coffee with friends, my family had been plotting to end it all. "Your grandmother's will is ironclad," Morrison continued. "We pulled the records. She had a lawyer drafted specifically to prevent challenges. She included a detailed explanation of her reasoning." "I never read that part," I admitted. "The lawyer just told me she left everything to me. She stated that you were the only family member who'd shown her genuine love and care. That your brother and parents only contacted her when they needed money. She wanted to ensure you were provided for." Tears stung my eyes. Grandma Ruth had been sharp and funny until the very end. She told me once that she saw through people's nonsense, that she knew who really cared and who was just performing. "Your mother posted bail an hour ago," Morrison said. "Your father is being held without bail due to the severity of the charges and flight risk assessment. Your brother is still at large, though we have units actively searching." "What charges are they facing?" "Conspiracy to commit murder, possession of explosive devices, terrorism-related charges. Your father is looking at 25 to life if convicted. Your mother could face 10 to 15 if an accessory." The numbers felt abstract, disconnected from the reality of what they meant. My mother, who used to make chocolate chip pancakes on Sunday mornings. My father, who taught me to ride a bike. Both of them facing decades in prison for trying to kill me. "We're going to need you to stay somewhere safe," Morrison said. We don't know if there were other conspirators or if your brother might attempt to complete the plan on his own. I don't have anywhere to go. The realization hit me hard. I couldn't return to my apartment. I couldn't trust any family members. My friends didn't know any of this was happening. Mr. Patterson, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. She can stay with me. I have a guest room. Place is secure. Morrison looked at him, then at me. Mr. Patterson has been cooperative with our investigation. His military background and quick action likely saved your life. However, the decision is yours. I thought about this stranger who'd pounded on my door before dawn, who'd driven me to safety, who'd sat with me through hours of questioning. He had no obligation to help me. Yet here he was, offering sanctuary. Thank you, I said to him. I'd appreciate that. Over the following days, the news coverage was relentless. My family's faces appeared on every channel, their crimes detailed in breathless reports. Journalists camped outside my apartment building, hoping for a statement I had no intention of giving. The building management allowed police to secure the apartment once the crime scene investigation concluded after 3 weeks. I hired a service to pack everything up and move it to storage. I couldn't bear to go back myself, couldn't stand in those rooms knowing my family had planned my death with such precision. Travis was caught trying to cross into Canada. He'd been staying with a friend who turned him in after seeing the news reports. Apparently, the friend had no idea what Travis had been planning. The trial preparation consumed months. Prosecutors built their case methodically, presenting evidence that painted a picture of calculated malice. My family had researched bomb-making online. They'd surveilled my building. They'd created detailed schedules of my movements. In one particularly chilling piece of evidence, investigators found a group text thread where the 3 of them discussed the plan. My mother had written, "She deserves this for what she did." My father's response, "We'll make sure she knows why before the end." Reading those words destroyed something inside me. Whatever love I'd held on to, whatever hope for reconciliation, died completely. Mr. Patterson, who insisted I call him Robert, became an unlikely anchor during this period. He'd survived his own family betrayal and understood the complex grief that came with it. You mourned not just what happened, but what you believed existed before. "They were never the people you thought they were," Robert said one evening as we sat on his porch. "You just didn't have reason to see it clearly before." But there were good moments. Real ones. I remember my dad teaching me to fish, my mom helping with homework. Were those all fake? No. People are complicated. They can hold genuine love and terrible darkness simultaneously. What happened doesn't erase the good parts. It just means those parts weren't enough to stop the darkness when it mattered. The trial began in September, 6 months after that terrible morning. I had to testify, recounting the inheritance dispute and the deterioration of our relationships. Defense attorneys tried to paint me as greedy and manipulative, someone who'd poisoned my grandmother against her own children. Walking into that courtroom felt like stepping into an alternate dimension. My father sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his hair grayer than I remembered. He wouldn't look at me. My mother kept her eyes fixed on her hands, folded neatly in her lap like she was attending church rather than facing terrorism charges. Travis glared at me with undisguised hatred, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Linda Hartwell, approached me with a gentle expression. She prepared me extensively for this moment, running through possible questions and defense tactics. Still, nothing could truly prepare you for accusing your own family in open court. "Ms. Crawford, can you describe your relationship with your grandmother Ruth in the years before her passing?" I took a breath, steadying myself. I visited her twice a week minimum. More often when her health declined. We'd have dinner together, watch old movies she loved. I handled her medical appointments, helped her with bills when arthritis made it difficult for her to write. And how often did other family members visit during this time? My brother came once in 3 years. Stayed maybe an hour, spent most of it on his phone. My parents visited twice. Both times they asked Grandma for money within the first 15 minutes. Travis's attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit named Gerard Walsh, stood during cross-examination. "Isn't it true, Ms. Crawford, that you actively discouraged your family from visiting your grandmother?" "No. That's completely false." "But you were the primary contact with her medical team. You controlled access to her care information." "I was her designated healthcare proxy because she chose me for that role. Anyone could have visited. They simply didn't." Walsh paced in front of the jury box. "Your grandmother's estate was worth nearly $2 million. That's quite a motivation to isolate an elderly woman from her family, wouldn't you say?" Linda objected before I could respond. Argumentative and assumes facts not in evidence. The judge sustained the objection, but the seed had been planted. That's what defense attorneys did, created doubt, suggested alternative narratives, made the victim seem complicit somehow. The prosecution dismantled those arguments efficiently over the following days. They presented Grandma Ruth's detailed will explanation, which included specific examples of my care versus my family's neglect. They showed evidence of my parents' and brother's repeated requests for money from her over the years, documented in emails and text messages subpoenaed from phone records. One particularly damning email from my father to Grandma Ruth read, "We need $30,000 for Travis's business venture. You've always supported this family. Don't abandon us now when it matters most." Grandma Ruth had responded simply, "I will not fund another failed scheme. You've borrowed over $200,000 from me in the past decade. None of it repaid." They demonstrated that I'd been her primary caregiver while the others barely visited. Nursing home staff testified about my regular presence and my family's absence. One nurse, an older woman named Carol, spoke about how Grandma Ruth would light up when I arrived and how she'd once cried after my parents visited because all they wanted was money. Most damning were the explosives and the detailed plans. No amount of legal maneuvering could explain those away. The bomb squad specialist who cleared my parents' garage testified about the sophistication of the materials found. "These weren't amateur supplies," he explained. "Whoever assembled this had studied proper construction techniques. The amount of explosive material present could have leveled a 3-story building." A digital forensics expert walked the jury through the online searches conducted from my family's computers. Building explosives for maximum casualties. How to avoid detection during surveillance. Apartment building structural weaknesses. The search history painted a horrifying picture of methodical planning. Then came the text messages between my family members. The prosecution displayed them on a large screen for the entire courtroom to see. "Travis, she's working late Tuesday. Building will be mostly empty. Better for collateral. Dad, Wednesday is better. More people means chaos. Harder for police response. Mom, are we certain this is necessary? There has to be another way. Dad, she stole from us. From your mother. This is justice. Travis, stop getting cold feet. We're all in this together." The courtroom fell silent as people absorbed the casual way they discussed murdering me and potentially dozens of others. I felt sick reading words written by people who'd raised me, who'd celebrated my birthdays and attended my school plays. Gerard Walsh tried to argue that the messages were taken out of context, that his client was merely venting frustration rather than actively planning violence. But the physical evidence contradicted that narrative entirely. They'd purchased materials. They'd conducted surveillance. They'd created blueprints with specific entry points and escape routes marked. During my father's testimony, against his attorney's advice, he actually tried to justify their actions. She manipulated an elderly woman into cutting out her own family. My mother wasn't in her right mind. She had dementia. Linda stood immediately. "Mr. Crawford, medical records show your mother had no dementia diagnosis. She passed a cognitive assessment just 2 months before her death. Would you like to revise your statement?" His face flushed red. "Those tests can be fooled. My daughter coached her." "You have evidence of this coaching?" "I know it happened. But no evidence. No recordings, no witnesses, no documentation of any kind?" He had nothing. His entire defense crumbled under basic questioning because it was built on fantasy rather than fact. My mother's testimony was harder to hear. She cried on the stand, claiming she'd been coerced by my father and brother, that she'd never actually wanted to hurt anyone. "I just wanted my family back together," she sobbed. "The inheritance tore us apart." Linda approached her with a tablet, pulling up more text messages. "Mrs. Crawford, did you send this message to your husband on July 15th? Make sure the timer gives us enough distance. I don't want us caught in the blast." My mother's face went white. I was scared. I wasn't thinking clearly. "This message suggests you were thinking very clearly about logistics and self-preservation. Does that sound like someone being coerced?" The jury watched her stumble through non-answers, and I saw the moment they stopped buying her victim narrative. You can't claim coercion while simultaneously planning your own escape route. Travis never testified. His attorney kept him off the stand, probably recognizing that his obvious rage would destroy any chance of sympathy. Instead, they tried to argue temporary insanity brought on by financial stress and family trauma. The prosecution brought in a psychiatrist who'd evaluated Travis in custody. Mr. Crawford shows no signs of psychosis or diminished capacity. He understood his actions were wrong and went to significant lengths to avoid detection. This demonstrates clear criminal intent. Each day of the trial felt like reopening the same wound. I'd sit in the gallery with Robert beside me, listening to the prosecution lay out exactly how my family had planned to kill me. Evidence photos showed my apartment building circled in red marker. They'd noted my parking spot, my typical arrival times, the location of my bedroom window. During a break one afternoon, I stood in the courthouse bathroom, gripping the sink and trying to breathe through a panic attack. A bailiff found me there, helped me to a quiet room, and sat with me until I could function again. "This is the hardest part," she said softly. "But you're doing great. Keep showing up. That's all you can do." Linda called multiple character witnesses to testify on my behalf. My former supervisor from work described me as reliable and kind. Friends spoke about my dedication to Grandma Ruth during her illness. The hospice nurse who'd been with us at the end told the jury about the love evident between us, how I'd held Grandma's hand and sung her favorite songs as she passed. "That young woman gave her grandmother dignity and comfort," the nurse said, pointing at me. "She sacrificed her own time and energy to ensure someone she loved didn't die alone and afraid." The defense tried to discredit these witnesses, suggesting I'd manipulated them too, but it rang hollow. You can't fake years of consistent behavior and genuine relationships. On the final day of testimony, Linda called Robert to the stand. He described hearing the police scanner, his decision to warn me, the details of our escape. Under cross-examination, Walsh tried to suggest Robert had ulterior motives. "Isn't it true you have your own history of family conflict, Mr. Patterson? My sister tried to kill me in 1998 over an inheritance dispute, yes. And perhaps that made you predisposed to believe the worst about this family? Maybe you jumped to conclusions?" Robert's expression remained steady. "I believed what the police scanner told me. I saw the evidence in real time. My personal history made me take the threat seriously rather than dismiss it. That decision likely saved Miss Crawford's life." Walsh had nothing more. You can't argue with someone who'd objectively been proven right. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. My father received 30 years without possibility of parole. The judge called his actions a profound betrayal of familial bonds and a threat to public safety. Travis got 25 years. He cried during sentencing, claiming he'd been manipulated by our parents. The judge wasn't swayed. My mother received 15 years. She'd cooperated with investigators and expressed remorse, which earned her a lighter sentence. She looked at me once during the sentencing, and I saw something broken in her eyes. Whether it was genuine regret or simply disappointment at being caught, I couldn't tell. I didn't feel victorious when it ended. Mostly, I felt hollow. The media circus outside the courthouse was overwhelming. Reporters shouted questions as Robert and I pushed through the crowd toward his truck. "How do you feel about the verdict? Will you forgive your family? What's next for you?" I kept my head down, saying nothing. There were no words adequate for what I felt. Robert drove us back to his house in silence. Once inside, I collapsed onto his couch and stared at the ceiling for what might have been hours. He brought me tea I didn't drink and sat in his armchair reading a book, just present without demanding anything from me. Eventually, Detective Morrison called. "I wanted to check on you." "Big day." "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel," I admitted. "There's no supposed to. Whatever you're feeling is valid. This kind of betrayal doesn't have a handbook." She informed me that victim services had resources available, therapists who specialized in family violence, support groups, financial assistance if needed. I took down the information mechanically, knowing I should care but feeling completely numb. That night, I had the nightmare for the first time. In it, I was back in my apartment, and the pounding on the door came too late. I opened it to find not Robert but Travis, holding the explosives, smiling. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, unable to separate dream from memory. Robert heard me one night and came to check on me. "Same dream?" "Yeah. It'll get better. Not fast, but eventually." "How long did it take you? After your sister?" He settled into the chair beside my bed. "Couple years before I could sleep through the night consistently. 5 before I stopped jumping at unexpected noises. But everyone's timeline is different. The inheritance became meaningless after everything. Money had caused this catastrophe, revealed the rot hiding beneath surface-level family bonds. I met with Grandma Ruth's attorney, a patient man named Howard who'd known her for decades. "She would be horrified by what happened," Howard said, reviewing documents in his office. "Ruth wanted to take care of you, not put you in danger." "I know. She couldn't have predicted this." We discussed options for the estate. After legal fees and other expenses, approximately $1.7 million remained. Looking at that number felt obscene now. This money had nearly gotten me killed. It had revealed that my family valued cash more than my life. "I want to give most of it away," I told Howard. "Set up a foundation or something in her name." "That's certainly possible. What kind of causes?" I thought about Grandma Ruth, what she cared about, what had mattered to her. Literacy programs. She was a librarian for 40 years. Animal shelters, because she always rescued strays. And maybe something for senior advocacy, helping elderly people who don't have family support. Howard smiled. She would have loved that. I'll draw up the paperwork. Establishing the Ruth Crawford Memorial Foundation took months of legal work, but it gave me purpose. I kept $200,000 for myself, enough to start over somewhere new, to have security without the burden of excessive wealth. The rest, a full $1.5 million, went toward helping others. The first literacy program we funded was at an elementary school in a low-income neighborhood. They used the money to stock their library and hire a reading specialist. Watching those kids' faces light up when they received their books made me cry in a way I hadn't since everything began. Your grandmother's legacy is living on, Howard said at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Not through money, but through the lives being changed because of it. I visited her grave regularly during those months. The cemetery was peaceful, surrounded by old oak trees that provided shade in the summer heat. I'd sit cross-legged beside her headstone and talk to her like she could hear me. They're in prison now, I told her one afternoon. 30 years for Dad. 25 for Travis. 15 for Mom. I keep trying to feel something about it, but mostly I'm just tired. A butterfly landed on the headstone, its wings brilliant orange in the sunlight. Grandma Ruth had loved butterflies, said they reminded her that beautiful things could emerge from darkness. I'm leaving soon. Starting over somewhere nobody knows what happened. Robert found me a place in Colorado, a town small enough to be quiet but big enough to get lost in. I got a job at the library there. Seemed fitting. The butterfly flew away, and I watched it disappear into the trees. I hope I'm making you proud. I hope this is what you wanted, for me to live, to use what you gave me to help people instead of destroying them over it. Robert helped me pack up the few belongings I'd accumulated during my stay at his place. Most of my old possessions remained in my apartment, which I'd hired someone to clear out and put into storage. I couldn't face going back there myself. You going to be okay out there alone? Robert asked as we loaded boxes into a rental truck. I think so. I have your number? And the therapist out there comes highly recommended. Good. Use both of those resources. Don't try to tough it out alone. The drive to Colorado took 2 days. I stopped at random motels, ate at diners off the highway, listened to podcasts about true crime that seemed tame compared to my own story. Somewhere in Kansas, I pulled over at a rest stop and just screamed into the empty plains. Let out months of rage and grief and confusion until my throat was raw. A truck driver approached cautiously. You okay, miss? Yeah. Just needed to get something out. He nodded like he understood. Long road'll do that to you. Safe travels. Before I left, I visited Grandma Ruth's grave one final time. Someone had left flowers recently, probably the staff from the nursing home where she'd spent her last months. I knelt beside the headstone, tracing her name with my fingers. You tried to take care of me, I whispered. Even after you were gone? I'm sorry it turned into this. The wind rustled through the trees surrounding the cemetery. Somewhere nearby, a bird sang. I'm going to be okay, though. Eventually. Because you taught me what real love looks like. It's not just blood relation. It's showing up. It's caring when nothing is gained from it. Robert showed me that again. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the graves. Time to go. My new apartment was small but comfortable. I got a job at a library, something quiet and low-key. My coworkers knew nothing about my past, and I preferred it that way. I was simply the new girl who shelved books efficiently and recommended good mystery novels. The Colorado town felt like stepping into a different world. Mountains loomed in the distance, snow-capped even in summer. The air was thinner, cleaner than what I'd grown up breathing. My apartment sat above a bookstore, which seemed almost too perfect. The owner, an elderly woman named Phyllis, had kind eyes and asked no prying questions when I signed the lease. You running from something or toward something? She asked while handing me the keys. Both, I think. She nodded sagely. That's usually how it works. Good luck, dear. The library job started in October. My supervisor, a woman in her 50s named Margaret, gave me a tour of the small building with obvious pride. We're not fancy, but we serve our community well. Lots of kids come after school. Seniors use our computer lab. We're a gathering place as much as a library. My responsibilities were straightforward: shelving returns, helping patrons find materials, managing the children's section during story time. The simplicity was exactly what I needed. No high stakes, no drama, just books and people who wanted to read them. The children's section became my favorite. Kids didn't care about your past or your trauma. They wanted someone enthusiastic to help them find books about dinosaurs or fairy tales. A little girl named Emma, maybe 7 years old, became a regular. Do you have any books about brave girls? She asked during her first visit. So many. What kind of brave? Adventure brave? Smart brave? Kind brave? Her eyes widened. There are different kinds? Absolutely. Let me show you. We spent an hour pulling books, discussing characters and their various forms of courage. Her mother thanked me afterward, mentioning that Emma had been struggling with confidence lately. Helping that child felt more meaningful than anything I'd accomplished in my previous life. Robert called every week to check in, like clockwork every Sunday evening. Sometimes we talked for hours, other times just a few minutes. He becomes something like family, the real kind, built on choice rather than obligation. How's the altitude treating you? He asked during one call. Still getting winded on stairs, but better. I'm sleeping through the night now most of the time. That's progress. It is. You hiking at all? Good for the soul, being in nature. Tried a beginner trail last week. Made it halfway before my legs gave out, but the views were incredible. Keep at it. Physical challenges help process mental ones. My therapist in Colorado, Dr. Patricia Winters, specialized in complex trauma. Our first session involved mostly history taking, but I could tell she understood the layers involved in family betrayal. You're not just grieving the loss of your family, she explained during our third meeting. You're grieving the version of them you believed existed. That's often harder than mourning a death. Because there's no closure. They're still alive, still out there, even if locked away. Exactly. And part of you keeps waiting for the revelation that it was all a mistake, that they're actually sorry, that the family you remember was real. She was right. Late at night, I'd sometimes wonder if they regretted their choices. If my mother lay awake in her cell thinking about bedtime stories she'd read me as a child. If my father remembered teaching me to ride a bike and felt shame. If Travis ever considered that we'd once been close, that he'd been my protector when we were young. But then I'd remember the text messages. The careful planning. The explosives. People who loved you didn't plot your murder over money. That was the truth I had to accept. Making friends in a new place proved harder than I'd anticipated. I was friendly with coworkers but kept them at arm's length. The idea of letting someone close enough to hurt me felt impossible. Trust had become a luxury I couldn't afford. Margaret noticed my isolation. There's a book club that meets here monthly, she mentioned casually while we were processing new acquisitions. Nice group. No pressure, but you might enjoy it. I'm not really a joiner. Neither was I after my divorce. But humans need connection. Even when we're scared of it. Her directness caught me off guard. How did you know I was scared? Honey, I've worked with people long enough to recognize someone hiding from the world. Whatever happened to you, it's okay to take your time. But don't take so much time you forget how to live. I attended the book club the following month, mostly to prove to myself I could. 8 people gathered in the library's meeting room, ranging from college age to retirement. The book was a literary thriller about family secrets. I thought it was beautifully written but emotionally exhausting, said a woman named Janet, who taught high school English. Sometimes families can be their own worst enemies. Something in her tone suggested personal experience. I found myself speaking before I could stop myself. I think the hardest part is accepting that people you love are capable of terrible things. The room went quiet. Janet looked at me with understanding that went beyond the book discussion. Yes. Exactly that. After the meeting, she approached me. I don't want to pry, but if you ever need someone who gets it, I'm here. My ex-husband tried to kill me 3 years ago. I understand complicated family trauma. Her honesty was startling and refreshing. Thank you. That means more than you know. We started meeting for coffee between book clubs. Janet had rebuilt her life after escaping her marriage, gone back to school, created an existence centered around her own happiness rather than someone else's approval. She became the first person in Colorado I trusted with pieces of my story. You don't have to tell me details, she said during one of our coffee dates. But I want you to know you're not alone in this. Lots of us are walking around with invisible scars. Do you ever stop feeling like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop? Eventually. But it takes longer than you'd like. I still check my locks 3 times before bed. Still carry pepper spray. The hypervigilance fades but doesn't disappear completely. Knowing someone else lived with similar fears made mine feel less isolating. We developed a shorthand for difficult days. A text that just said "today is hard" was enough to prompt support without requiring explanations. Winter in Colorado was harsh but beautiful. Snow blanketed everything, turning the town into something from a postcard. The library became a refuge for people escaping the cold. I'd make hot chocolate for the kids during story time, watch them warm their hands around the cups while I read tales of adventure and magic. One afternoon, a mother approached me after story time. My daughter Lily talks about you constantly. You're her favorite person at the library. She's a sweet kid. Always asking thoughtful questions about the stories. She lost her father last year. Car accident. She's been struggling with trusting adults again. But she trusts you. The responsibility of that trust felt heavy but also healing. If this child could find safety with me after loss, maybe I was capable of being a safe harbor despite my own brokenness. Christmas approached, my first holiday season truly alone. Robert invited me to visit him, but the thought of traveling back felt like regression. Instead, I volunteered to work the library's extended holiday hours. Margaret seemed pleased. "You're a good egg," she said while decorating the library Christmas tree. "This place is better with you in it." On Christmas Eve, I opened presents by myself in my apartment. Robert had sent a care package, a warm blanket, fancy hot chocolate, and a book he thought I'd enjoy. Janet dropped off homemade cookies. Even Phyllis, my landlord, left a poinsettia outside my door with a note, "Merry Christmas to a good tenant." Small kindnesses from people who owed me nothing. That's what family had become, chosen connections rather than obligatory ones. I spent Christmas morning hiking one of the easier mountain trails. The snow was deep but manageable. At a clearing with a view of the valley below, I stopped to catch my breath and take in the landscape. Everything looked clean and new, untouched by human complications. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, "Merry Christmas. I hope you're doing well." My stomach dropped. Only my family had this number. I blocked it immediately, but the damage was done. Someone had reached out, breaking the barrier I'd built between old life and new one. That night, the nightmares returned with intensity. I woke up screaming, certain I heard footsteps in my apartment. It took 2 hours and a phone call to Robert before I could calm down enough to function. "They're locked up," he reminded me gently. "They can't reach you." But someone found my number somehow. Maybe a journalist or someone digging into the case. Probably a reporter trying to get a story for an anniversary piece. Change the number again. Add another layer of security. I did exactly that the next morning. New phone number, unlisted. Informed only Robert, Janet, and my workplace. The vulnerability I'd felt began to recede, but slowly. Dr. Winters and I discussed the incident in our next session. Intrusions from the past will happen. What matters is how you respond. You took appropriate action, reached out for support, didn't spiral into destructive coping. I wanted to drink until I couldn't feel anything. But you didn't. That's growth. That's healing in action. "How are you settling in?" he asked during one call. "Better. I'm sleeping through the night now." "That's progress." "It is. Healing isn't linear. You'll have good days and setbacks." "I know. Yesterday I saw someone who looked like Travis and my whole body tensed up. Took me an hour to calm down." "That's trauma. It takes time." I'd started seeing a therapist who specialized in family violence. She helped me understand that grief for living people who'd betrayed you was particularly complicated. You couldn't find closure through death or distance alone. You're mourning the family you thought you had, she explained during one session. That's valid and necessary. But you're also discovering strength you didn't know you possessed. Months turned into a year. I adopted a cat from the local shelter, a scraggly orange tabby who'd been abandoned. We understood each other, survivors learning to trust again. I made friends slowly, carefully. Opening up to new people felt risky, but isolation wasn't sustainable either. There was a book club at the library that met monthly. The members were kind and welcoming, asking nothing more than my opinions on whatever novel we'd chosen. One member, a woman named Janet who taught high school English, became a regular coffee companion. She'd survived her own trauma, a violent ex-husband who'd left her scarred but stronger. "You never really get over it," she told me one afternoon. "You just learn to carry it differently. Like a stone in your pocket instead of a boulder on your back." I liked that metaphor. It felt accurate. The second anniversary of that terrible morning arrived quietly. I took the day off work and drove to a nearby lake. Sitting on the shore, I watched sunlight dance across the water and thought about how far I'd come. My family was in prison, likely for the remainder of their meaningful lives. I'd survived their attempt to destroy me. I'd built a new life from the ashes of the old one. Was I happy? Not entirely. Happiness felt like too simple a word for the complexity of what I felt. But I was peaceful. Content. Rebuilding slowly towards something that resembled wholeness. My phone rang, Robert calling. "Hey," I answered. "How are you?" "Good. Wanted to check in, see how you're doing today." "I'm at a lake. Just thinking." "That's healthy. Processing is important." "I've been thinking about forgiveness. Whether I should try to find it." He was quiet for a moment. Forgiveness is personal. No one can tell you whether you owe it or not. What matters is whether holding on to anger is hurting you more than them. I don't think I'm holding on to anger anymore. I'm just moving forward. They're in the past now. Then maybe you've already found your version of forgiveness. It doesn't have to look like what people expect. After we hung up, I sat for another hour, watching the water. Grandma Ruth used to say that life had a way of revealing people's true nature eventually. She'd been right about that. She'd also said that we get to choose who we let into our hearts, that family was what we made of it. Robert had chosen to help me when he had every reason to ignore the danger. Janet had chosen to befriend me despite knowing my history. The library staff had welcomed me without judgment. Those were my family now. The ones who'd shown up when everything was broken, who helped me piece together something new. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I stood, brushing sand from my jeans, and walked back to my car. Tomorrow I'd return to work. I'd shelve books and recommend stories and live the quiet life I'd built. My past would always be part of me, but it didn't define my future anymore. I'd survived. Despite everything, I'd survived. And maybe that was enough.